thanks for taking the time. So we just thought, whilst we can't do physical events, it's a good idea to try and continue the engagement with the community in a virtual way as best we can. So we've got a fairly interesting lineup together this afternoon to talk about charging and charging infrastructure within Ireland, and hopefully everyone will find something useful out of this session today. Towards the end of the meeting today, we'll have a Q&A. So if you've any burning questions that you'd like to ask as we go along, there's a Google form that you can submit questions to, and we'll pick as many as we can of those out. The link's there on the screen, but I think one of the guys will also put that into the chat. So please submit any questions and we'll get to those later on. So can I skip forward? Kevin, are you presenting? Can I skip to the next slide? Yeah, carry on. Great. Okay, so just quickly run through the agenda. So I'll give a quick update now about the, or just from the EVOA committee side of things, activities that we've been working on. Then we have, very glad to say we have Conor O'Brien from ESB eCars with us today, and he's going to give us an update on the state of the ESB eCars charging infrastructure and how the plans are progressing in the future, for the future there. Then we've got a panel discussion, so we've brought together, I guess, some of the most prominent installers here in Ireland. So we've got Nigel, Darren, Chris Kelly and Jerome, who are going to field some of your questions that you've been submitted during the week. So that should be a good session, and we'll hopefully cover off a lot of the ground around home charging and also some public charging areas as well, particularly from Chris's side, obviously being involved in EasyGo. Then we've got something which is a bit of a look into the future, I guess. We have Simon Vogt, who is joining us from Germany, and he is going to talk to us about his business called And Charge, which is basically providing incentivization around public EV charging services elsewhere in Europe, with a view to hopefully come to Ireland and other territories soon. It'll be pretty interesting. And then, as I said at the beginning, we're going to have an open Q&A session where, you know, you can ask any question. It doesn't have to be about charging or charging infrastructure, and we'll, between us all, we'll try and answer those the best we can. Okay, so if I can quickly move on to my update. So some of you might know about a bit about what we do within the committee, the work that we do. Others of you may not be familiar, have just come in from outside of or joined just through the Facebook group. So we, as an association, are obviously trying to drive as best we can EV adoption in Ireland, and to make sure that all of you are getting what you need now and into the future. And so with that in mind, we're engaged across quite a broad spectrum of stakeholders. Obviously, we've had a long-running engagement with both ESB eCars and ESB networks, and that's something that continues, and we have quarterly meetings, certainly with eCars, and I've had quite a lot of engagement with ESB networks as well recently, talking about things like their Dingle project and their strategy around the electrification of heat and transport. I won't steal Conor's thunder, so I won't talk about too much eCars stuff, but he's going to give us a good update later. Obviously, we're trying the best we can to get engagement with all of the other charge network providers here in Ireland. We have a good rapport going with EasyGo. We have also established contact with Ionity, and quite recently this week I managed to get in contact with someone from FastNed, who are obviously thinking about coming here to Ireland in the future, which is great news. We've recently established a quarterly meeting with SEAI, obviously to talk about their incentives and how we can work together to help push EV adoption in general. Myself and Guillaume on the committee have also got involved in a couple of other groups beyond Ireland. So there's the Electric Vehicle Association of England and Scotland, and there's some other small groups in Wales and Northern Ireland. So we've started to talk on a a UK and Ireland basis, which is pretty interesting. And Guillaume is also involved in the global EV Alliance as well. So you know, we're spreading our influence far and wide and learning what we can from other territories as best we can, which is great. The other really important engagement, I guess, is with the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, and we were previously engaged with them before the new government was formed, but now the portfolio looking around climate change and how mobility is affecting that has moved to the Department of Transport under O'Brien. Now we're trying to re-establish contact with them, and hopefully we'll get a meeting with them in the not too distant future. We've also, we're developing at the moment a strategy around lobbying councils to make sure they're utilising the grants that are available for on-street chargers. And obviously most of us probably know there are those grants available, but they haven't been very widely taken up. We know from talking to some of the Dublin councils that there's a lot of work going on there. We might not see a lot changing yet, but there is activity going on, but we're not sure in a lot of the other territories. So we're trying to start reaching out and developing a strategy for doing that. Some of you might have seen, hopefully we put out a survey recently around charger blocking or icing, whatever you want to call it. And we're trying to get some feedback around the problems that you guys are having so we can feed that back into the relevant parties. Obviously the charge providers, but beyond that as well. We've had 140 responses to date. I think we can do a bit better than that. So given the amount of complaining we see about this sort of thing on the forum, I'd encourage anyone who's got feedback on that. We've extended the survey for another week. So if you could hit the Survey Monkey link there, that'd be great. Next page, please. Okay, some of you might have seen we just released this week an upgraded website. It's been a long time coming. Some great work done there by a number of people, not least Paul Kelly, and we're also looking at slight rebranding as well. We're looking at changing our logo, so that's something that we're working on. So you might see a new logo popping up, and we want to do a kind of relaunch at that stage. We had hoped to do all of this at the back end of last year, but obviously the pandemic has slowed a lot of that work down in terms of being able to do a physical launch, which would be nice. So we'll hopefully be able to do that later in the year. The AGM obviously will be coming up fairly soon in April. We will be looking to make some slight changes around the membership for next year. So we'll be bringing some proposals to the AGM around what we want to do with paid memberships and corporate memberships. So that's something that we'll share at the AGM. Obviously, we continue to publish as much material as we can on the website and on our social media. We continue to do the sales figures for BEVs and FEVs, which is always pretty interesting and always good to see those going up. Hopefully you saw recent review I drove the e-Canter truck, which was pretty interesting. So that was fun. And I think we have a few other car reviews coming soon. The MG ZV one, I'm hoping to get hold of fairly soon once we get out of the current restrictions. But as I always say, we're looking for, you know, anyone who wants to keep with that sort of thing. It's very, very much appreciated. So put your hand up, and if you've got some content you want to share, that'd be great. We've also been doing recently a quarterly newsletter, which has had pretty good engagement, and hopefully anyone that's seen that has enjoyed the content we're providing there. With other media, yeah, we continue to engage as much as we can, or we're asked to. I'm actually expecting to be on News Talk this Thursday on a section that Dr. Conor O'Brien does around environment. So looking forward to that one. Yeah, so obviously, like I said, physical events are postponed for the time being, but we'll keep a weather eye on that as things start to change, and hopefully they will soon. Just to say, if you aren't already an EVOA member, if you would join us, that would be great. We have 2 levels of membership paid, which is only €10 a year for the time being. That helps us with our activities. And if you can't stretch to that, then there's an associate membership, which is free. The main difference at the moment being that you can vote at the AGM if you're a paid member, and we're developing additional incentives as well for paid members. As I said, AGM tentatively for April, and that will be a virtual event again, unfortunately, but it went pretty well last year, we think. So, okay, that's my update. So I think what we'll do now is we'll pass over to Conor from eCars, and he's going to give us an update about the charging infrastructure, the ESB eCars charging infrastructure. I will present your slides.
Great.
How's that?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for that, Simon. Yeah, how you all doing? Look, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. We've had a lot of engagement with the Irish EV Owners Association and Irish EV owners in general through surveys and lots of meetings with Simon and his predecessor over the years. So it's nice to be well, we've lots of meetings with the committee. It's nice to have an opportunity to speak to broader association as well and other EV owners. My name is Conor O'Brien. I'm the Public Policy and Regulation Manager for eCars. And I'm just going to give a kind of a quick run through, I suppose, of ESB's involvement in electromobility, the network that's there, where it originated from, I suppose the services that are there to support that network or to provide that network, and then look a bit about, I suppose, what we're trying to do to the journey we're on to kind of bring the network to the next level. So if you can move that on, Simon, that'd be great. So yeah, so I'll go into detail around the network that we developed in Ireland in a couple of minutes in more detail. But we started that around 2010, 2009. I think the first chargers were installed around 2010. We've since gone on and we've just over 100 rapids installed in London for Transport for London. That's servicing the taxi industry and the public there. We've also about 39 rapid chargers or fast chargers installed in Coventry. And we're undertaking, I think it's about 400 charge points in Birmingham City as well. And we're just kicking off that project at the moment. And then there's a few other things, I suppose. Within Ireland, we've installed chargers privately for a number of companies, but one of the largest ones would be Jaguar Land Rover site down in Shannon. And then we've also recently implemented through Smart Energy Services, which is another ESB division. They've introduced a new electric bus at the hotel out at the airport for the Crown Plaza. If you can move on, Simon. So just to talk about the network, there's roughly around 1,100 charge points across the island. That includes Northern Ireland as well. So I'm going to talk about some of these updates. This is, I suppose, probably around a current figure of chargers that are there. There's about 100 fast or DC chargers, so between 44 and 50 kilowatt chargers. There's 4 high power chargers, 150 kilowatt units in place at the moment, and we hope to increase that significantly over the next while. And again, I'll go into that in more detail in a bit. The network that's there, I suppose, it's spread right across the country, and I know I'm talking to a lot of you now who know this all better than I do. And the original network, I suppose, was installed as a pilot project with the regulator, with the Irish government, and it was done under a managed service agreement at the time, where we entered into managed service agreement, a memorandum of understanding with some of the car companies that they would bring cars to the market. We would put charging infrastructure in place, and the government would put certain incentives in place. And that was around 2010. So at that stage, I suppose there was very few people even providing charge points. There was very few options around electric cars. I think the first Leaf came around 2011, 2010. I know we got a number of Mitsubishi IMEV at the time. I brought in especially, and that was they were 2010 registrations. And that's where the network developed. The whole idea of trying to solve the chicken and egg scenario. So you put chargers right across the country, whether it's commercially viable to do so or not. It was about geographic spread, and that's what that pilot, I suppose, achieved to a certain degree. You'll see every county has a number of chargers. You know, most large towns would have charge points, and then putting fast charge points then on the motorway or national road networks. And I suppose that's where we're at today, and we're trying to move beyond that, and I'll go into that in more detail in a minute. If you want to move on, Simon. So just I mentioned, just for any of you who aren't aware, aren't seasoned EV drivers, just I suppose the top part in white kind of just outlines, I suppose, the key pieces from a customer perspective as to what they need from the network. So I suppose to be able to find the nearest charge point easily, to be able to easily start the transaction and stop it and connect and charge, and then payment and billing that supports that. So I suppose beyond the physical network that I've just talked about in the previous slide, there's all of those services in the bottom half of the slide that I suppose supports that physical network. So that's the chargers themselves are smarter. They have communications within them that communicates back to our charge point management system. We then have 24/7 customer call center, which is provided by Abtran in Cork on our behalf. They have a certain amount of remote functionality of the network if there's issues to reset chargers and do various things. Then we have our maintenance contractors who do preemptive maintenance, where they visit each charge point a number of times a year, and reactive maintenance, obviously, when there's issues. And then all the digital supports, the app, Facebook, and different things, the website, etc., that underpins all of that and gets our communications out there as well. So I suppose just to go through that, particularly for people who are maybe thinking about EVs and aren't seasoned. Do you want to move on, Simon? So we introduced pay. The network was free to use, I suppose, since the first charger went in around 2010, up to November in 2019, where I suppose we undertook in early 2019 to replace a lot of the fast chargers. And once we were happy that we got the network up to a reasonable amount of reliability, we introduced pricing for that network in November 2019. And then we undertook, and I'll go into that in more detail, to replace a lot of the AC network from the original pilot, where we would have had multiple vendors of chargers. A lot of the charge points were no longer supported by the manufacturer, and we couldn't get parts for, etc. To trying to go towards, I suppose, less more modern equipment that proves to be more reliable, as I suppose the market developed and more companies started to provide charging equipment. And then also have the support of manufacturers where we could get parts, etc. So we then introduced pricing on the AC network, the 22 kilowatt and below network, in August onto September in 2020. And you can see the pricing around that at the site. And we would have engaged a lot, I suppose, with both the Owners Association, through surveys with EV owners around in advance of that, and we did a lot of one-to-one interviews as well around the pricing and what it should be. And I think in general we've got a lot of positive feedback. We're not going to keep everybody happy, I think, when we introduce pricing on something, but we've got a lot of positive feedback in that, I suppose, is making the network that is there, improving availability for those that actually need it. So that's the main points around that. You can see the pay-as-you-go rates in the right-hand side there and that. So just around, I've already touched on it a little bit around customer service and engagement. We know we have a bit to go, and we I suppose we had a dip in where we wanted to be with the network a couple of years ago, but also how we engaged on the charging network and where we are. We're looking to improve that all the time, and welcome feedback around that. And we're trying to, I suppose, improve our outreach as well around the etiquette of use of the network and how we communicate around the usage for new drivers that are coming on stream. I know we've talked lots with Simon and the committee as well around how we could, I suppose, partner within that as well to do a bit more around that. And I suppose we're trying to engage with lots of different stakeholders in the area to try and understand how we improve things and take our learnings as well from the UK market as well, how we can improve. So I suppose I've gone through kind of, I suppose, where we are with the network at the moment, where it originated from, and I suppose a number of years ago we looked at how can we what do we need to do to bring the network on to the next level, and we're looking at what, I suppose, what's happening in other markets. What are customers looking for? The network that we delivered, I suppose that while it had geographic spread, it probably needed to move a new direction to meet how the market has developed over that period of time. And I suppose it's trying to address all of those points in the column on the left-hand side, which is range anxiety. The cars are getting to higher range, but how can we ensure that we ensure there's a network right across the country, not just in the urban areas and places where it's most commercially viable to do it. How can we meet the expectations of the latest cars that are coming to the market that are going to be able to charge at 150 kilowatts and in time even higher than that? How can we improve our network availability levels? And I talked a bit about that already as the replacement program, and I'll go into that again in more detail. There's the queuing and overstay at chargers where people are staying on chargers too long, where there's queues at one-off chargers, and I know there are still issues that we're, I suppose, trying to work through and solve, and I'll go into the kind of plans that we have, and then ensuring there's confidence in the network. And I suppose this is it's still something that we're working on. Obviously, it's a work in progress. So how do we ensure that network is there on a national basis? How can we introduce 150 kilowatt charging in hubs so that we're reducing, if there is a single point of failure, that there's a sec rather than having a single point of failure, that there's a second charger, a third charger, a fourth charger, that they're reliable, that if somebody else is there charging in front of you, that you're not queuing behind them, that you'll have another option as well in that point of view. And how can we ensure that we have the support from the charge point manufacturers themselves to ensure that we have the parts to service those charges. And then what I talked about, how can we improve our communications around the use of the network and the customer experience, and ensure that it's a network that I suppose that we're happy with and that it's reliable in general. So if just move on, Simon, if you don't mind. So I suppose that we developed that plan that I talked about is how we could address all of those, and we came up with a plan that I suppose installed rapid chargers but fast chargers and high power chargers across Ireland in hubs, renews the existing network, and around that time there was the Climate Action Fund had put out a call for applications. So we made a big effort to put in an application for that. I think it was about 150 pages. I was involved in putting it together, with a view to building out these hubs and renewing the network right across the country. And we came in top on that, and I think we got about 10 million in funding, and then ESB matched it with another 10 million funding, and that's purely for capital expenditure, not the operation expenditure. For the network, and I suppose we draw that down as we deliver the project over time. So as part of that project, which was signed, I think, in October 2019, to date we've replaced about 186 chargers, which are done right across the country. There's that's in every county right across, with equipment that we're finding is a lot more reliable in general. I know we have some issues here and there. I think we're going to always have a little bit of that with equipment, but it's trying to get them resolved as quickly as we can. Then separately, our partner organisation within ESB, Smart Energy Services, had a partnership with Tesco's, and they've installed over 40 chargers at their sites, again of up to 22 kilowatt AC chargers. Just go beyond that, again, Simon, if you don't mind. Strange talking out of the screen and not hearing any feedback. So just then, the other part of this project as well is a upgrade to fast. So the plan is to do over 50 of the older AC chargers to upgrade them. So using the same electrical connection to quickly roll out DC chargers in towns around the country that maybe there wasn't fast charging previously. So I suppose it allows us, rather than having to go into do civil works and electrical works and connections, which is all timely or takes quite a bit of time. It takes a little bit of time to do new sites from scratch. So this allows us to get in to towns right around the country. We've about 17 done so far, and you can see yourself in the slides. I'm not going to go through them. Right across the country, from Ballina to Westport, Clifton, Kenmare. So it's trying to get that spread to get more DC chargers out there. So there's 50 of those planned in total. I think the next phase is planned like to Burr, which is Burr and Offaly, Killarney. I think there's a couple planned for West Cork, Carlow, a couple of places in Wexford as well, Monaghan, and then we'll be continuing to phase after phase. So we'd expect to get another, hopefully maybe 20 of those installed by the end of the year, another 20 of them as well. Just to mention about the project itself, that the project itself is to run till about 2023 for completion. Simon, if you want to move on. So then the other part of the project that we're working on is to develop these larger sites. So there's three types of those. So one is some of the ones you've seen already that have been implemented, which is where we put a 50 kilowatt unit and a 150 kilowatt that can load balance. At these sites. So it's a 50 kilowatt and a 150 site. That's one type of charging site. Then the other types are 4 vehicles that can charge it at 150 kilowatts. So basically 600 kilowatt capacity at the site. And then the other larger sites is the 8 vehicle charging hubs, which is the 1.2 megawatt location to the site. So you'll see 4 have been developed so far: Portlaoise, Kilcullen, Galway, Parkree and Kells. Under construction at the moment is there's one in Athlone, Ballinalack, Carrigan Shannon, which you can see on the right hand side. And I think we're starting fairly shortly on Ormore. Latty's due to go in as well, Sligo, Louth, Cork City as well. So they're the immediate pipeline of sites that are either under construction or that we will be starting construction in the next month or so. A challenge around finding these sites, and I suppose we're not where we wanted to be in the rollout of these chargers, is trying to find suitable sites with that I suppose we're reliant on site hosts to give us the locations, to provide us with the space to put them. So we've made all of the sites accessible from a wheelchair perspective in the new sites for the new hub sites. So I suppose there's quite a few spaces required to go with this, plus the electrical equipment to go with that. So the larger kind of 4 and 8 vehicle hubs require substations and electrical compounds, and you will have seen similar from other providers. So you do need a considerable amount of space, and that's definitely a challenge for us when talking to site hosts around this. Simon, if you want to move on. So the first of the 8 vehicle hub. I don't know why I have 4x8 vehicle, but anyway, what it's supposed to be is an 8 vehicle hub, and that's under construction at the moment in Junction 14. And you can see the construction, it's at an early stage. We'll expect that to go live in kind of end of May, early June, all going well, and depending on COVID and all the other different things. So we're looking forward to getting that delivered, and it'll be the first of those sites. So that's a kind of an overview of the direction where we're heading at the moment. So I think that's the last slide. Yeah,
it is.
And I'll be around at the end for questions anyway, so I can take those.
We'll take a couple of questions now, and if you can hang around to the end, that'd be great, and then we can. I think there's a few more rolling in, but we'll take a couple now.
It's distracting there. I could see the questions coming in the middle of the presentation. I was like, putting me off.
I had a couple. I have a couple that were submitted during the week, so I'll go to those, and then we'll take a couple that have come in as we go along, and then we'll move on. So I think you might have answered some of this already. There's a question about hubs, which you've obviously addressed in the presentation there, and I think that's great news and very positive for everyone to see. I guess an additional part of that question was regards specifically to like tourist areas like the Wild Atlantic Way, which traditionally haven't been well served by the network. Is there other than what you've shown us there, are there specific plans to address the West Coast so that, you know, from a tourist perspective, it makes it easy?
I suppose there's not a specific Wild Atlantic Way plan, but I suppose we are mindful in some of the upgrades that we've done that they are in those areas. So I don't think I mentioned there, Dingle as well is on our next phase of plans of upgrades. So if you look recently towards the end of last year was, early last year was Sligo. We did Ballina, Westport, Clifton. We'll look to do Lahinch. So we're trying to, and sorry, that's a upgrade from the AC to DC at least. For some of the bigger towns along the Wild Atlantic Way, they will receive at least some of the smaller hubs, the 150 or the 50 kilowatt by 150 in time, I expect. But we have no plans, I suppose, to roll out additional kind of AC 22 kilowatt chargers. Really, any part of Ireland, really. I don't know if that answers your question.
Right. I think that's good news. I was going to ask specifically about Dingle, and I know it's something we've talked about before, especially with the Dingle project in mind. So that's
it's funny. I had a call with a guy from Kerry Council yesterday who was he was saying it already. He's saying it's bombarded during the summer, Dingle, and then during the winter, then it's a lot less, I suppose, because the car park fills up there. So it's so I think at least having a charger that will have a quicker turnover of people would be at least a benefit anyway.
Yeah. There's a question also around obviously icing, and you know that's something we're looking to work with you and feedback information based on our survey. But from your perspective, you know, what are the actions that you guys are taking specifically around trying to deal with icing and locking in general?
I suppose from our perspective, it's engagement with the councils to try and enforce stuff around this. We've had a lot of engagement in the past as well around these, and some of them it hasn't been possible to get them marked. And then you'll see in some of the newer sites that we're doing, not just the hub sites, but the upgrades to 50 kilowatt as well. We've marked those out or put fresh marking on them as well. Part of, I suppose, when we met you last time as well, Simon, was saying, look, and the survey you mentioned there as well is, look, let us know as well what are the ones that are bad again, or that are causing issues, and then we can really focus on those and which particular local authorities to speak to around those as well, and see if we can try and get them addressed again. So it's trying to bring it front of mind again to identify what they are, I suppose, or what the issues are, and then we'll put a program together to do another kind of communication, and hopefully with yourselves as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always going to be an annoying problem. It's likely to be, I guess. And education is a big part of it, and I think, maybe people that will, leave their car parked somewhere where it's already charged, or even use it as a parking space and things like that. And those things
And that starts bringing up the tourney. We've had lots of discussions around the overstay fee for AC chargers as well, and just there's diverging views on that one as well. So it's not simple, and I suppose it'd be good from your survey to I suppose understand is it not, if it's not marked in the first place, or is it marked and then it's just been abused anyway, regardless, which we see lots of as well. So.
Yeah. Okay. I had another question, and I know I gave you sight of this one earlier because I wasn't really sure. This came in from the Louth Environmental Group, and we're asking some questions around. I guess it was the original investment towards the network of €55 million. Is that you can talk to, or is that a very strange, out of context question? Do you want me to read it out for you again?
No, I can tell you what government funding went into the network. So the original, as I talked about, the pilot rollout of the network, so that was a pilot project that was done to look at the impact of electric vehicles on the grid. There was 25 million from the regulator to that at the time, and that meant that we put out chargers right across the country, to every part of the country, whether it was commercially viable or not, to put that geographic spread there, the chicken and egg scenario that I talked about. So that network's still there, still operated, despite Dingle mightn't add up commercially most of the year, or all of those other places. So that was the initial investment to do that, right, and operate the network. And then beyond that, the 10 million that I've talked about there from CAF. So I think we've drawn down about $1 million of that, right? So there's the regulated money at the start, 25, and then we've drawn down about $1 million, or maybe $1.5 million, something like that, from the Climate Action Fund so far. So they're the figures. They're very much open. They're online.
Absolutely. And I guess one of the things that is maybe not obvious that for people that are coming to this quite recently is that obviously a lot of money was put in 10 years ago, but a lot of that infrastructure has had to be replaced more recently because, as you said, it's become defunct. Some of the manufacturers have gone and so on. So it's a continuing investment situation.
Yeah, and there's considerable amount to operate the network. I'm in eCars long enough to remember when 40 or 50 cars was a big year. We were delighted when we broke the 50 mark for EV sales in a year, right? So it's nice to see that there's thousands of cars coming on the road now at this stage. But it's I think I joined eCars in 2011. So it's come a long way since that point. I remember all the ups and downs around it. So
yeah. One more question then, and there's always a lot of questions around the state of the network in Northern Ireland, and I know some complications around that from the conversations that we've had. But do you want to broadly talk about what the situation is with Northern Ireland and why it's where it is at the moment, and possibly how it might improve in the future?
Yeah, and we do got a lot of engagement with the Northern Irish EV owners around this, right? It's not that we're probably where we were a number of years ago here with the network in Northern Ireland. It's not where we want it to be, right? So we ran into, I suppose there's a number of issues with it. The network was rolled out similar time frame that it was rolled out here. I suppose none of the charge points that are there now are actually supported by the manufacturers anymore, so we can't get parts. So what we actually need to do is an asset replacement program, replace a lot of the chargers that are there. And we estimate that probably somewhere in the region of kind of 1.5 to 2 million bracket. We plan to replace about 30, and we planned to do that a year or two ago. And when we went to do it, we realized that actually legally to replace the chargers, and we've done a few at this stage anyway, was that there was no permitted development rights. Was one issue. So that basically means, so if you want to replace a charger, you would have to go for planning permission to do it, right, based on the legislation that was in place at the time. We got that changed, which was great, and was great help from the Department for Infrastructure to get that. And that came into force in December. We went to mini tender for chargers in November, and we will be plan to replace 30 and a number of rapid chargers. But to be honest with you, I suppose there's no commercial case. There's 4,000 cars. It's very difficult to I suppose we're a commercial business, to replace, to put 2 million euros into the network without some kind of funding. We're in Birmingham, we're in Coventry, we're in Transport for London. In all of those, there's been OLEV funding to support that, and I suppose we're looking to see if we can try and get some kind of help to replace the chargers there and get the reliability up to a level that we would all be happy with, and then if we can get that up, to introduce pricing in that as well in time. But we're not happy with it. We understand that, and we're engaging with a lot of stakeholders on that. We gave a statement to the EV owners in Northern Ireland there recently in relation to that as well, I think, and they have that published on their blog.
Yeah, they mentioned, because Guillaume and I engaged with a couple of the guys from the groups up north, and they mentioned that they met with you quite recently. So
yeah, I keep in touch with Mark Mark McCall in relation to that fairly frequently.
Yeah.
And can I just mention beyond that, I suppose from a Northern Ireland perspective, I suppose be keen that, we're saying, look, the network needs to be developed there. But beyond that, I suppose there needs to be a kind of a plan as to what is the target for 2030 there. How can we look at, and I'm not saying this from an ESB perspective, I'm saying this to whoever. There is funding from the UK government to provide charging infrastructure. Some of that needs to be ring fenced for Northern Ireland and given to, put out to the market for whoever to install those. I know there's Interreg funding coming in the next year or two as well to install chargers. So I think there needs to be more of a long-term plan as to if the 2030 target is coming into play, how can that be facilitated? How is there a roadmap for infrastructure and EV numbers and et cetera to build up to be ready for that? So that's just a wider point beyond the existing network. I think there needs to be a bit of thinking on that.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's positive now that the UK is driving towards 2030 in the same way we are. So at least there's alignment there now. So hopefully that will happen. Okay, I'm just going to pass over to Kevin, who's got a couple of quick questions, and then we'll move on and take some more at the end if there's more for you. Then, Kevin, are you there?
Yep, Kevin Miriam O'Callaghan Dowling here. So, hey Conor. So I'm going to just take questions that are coming in on the forum and in the chat as we can best. I'll leave most of it to later on, but I've got two questions for you now. One really softball question. Someone's asking.
That means there's a hard ball. Okay.
It's a less softball after. Someone's asking, where is the Twitter account, and will you return to Twitter?
I don't think we ever had a Twitter account. I don't think. There's an ESB group Twitter account, maybe.
Yeah, I think the question is there's actually a few folks who asked this over the last day or so to forum, and I think it's a question of people easily contacting ESB eCars on Twitter to go like, here's a queue, here's a broken thing. Derek is just saying there on the channel here that at ESB eCars is there since 2010. I think it's locked though. It has like 22 followers. It's not actually being used. So
I'm going to have to take that one away and come back to you. I don't actually know. I know there's a function within the app to report issues if you want directly. I know that's there, but from a Twitter perspective, I don't know, and I can ask the marketing team. I'm sorry. Softball, yeah, but I can't answer.
It's the softest above. The next one, it's not really a hard ball, but it's I'll probably ask this at the wider group later on. We're doing the big Q&A, but there's a bunch of questions, and the theme is kind of the future. So the government's 2030 plan is basically 1 million EVs on the road. How do you guys react to that? How does the grid react to that? Like, what's the kind of general plan, and how do you kind of get to that North Star of 1 million cars on the road?
Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose what we're looking at now is that initial steps to meet that, and I suppose there has, between ourselves and other providers, there has been a good move in the last year or two. We're not where we want to be. I suppose there's a lot to be played out in this as well, as to trying to understand the battery ranges, the distance the cars are going to travel. Obviously, I noticed SEI did a thing during the week. They reckon about 33%, I think, if I can remember correctly, of people can't charge at home. So how do we meet that? Most of our estimates are roughly around the 85 to 90% of charging will be done at home or in the workplace. So then it's trying to meet that requirement in other places. But I think it's we'll do our bit as much as we possibly can. But trying to facilitate that rest, I think it's just going to, as EV numbers grow, that's just going to naturally happen because the commercial case will be there. So if I'm a service station owner, I'll put a charger in my area. The local authorities will step up more and more the more that there is demand from people within their areas. So I think there is a lot to go on that. I know ESB networks are doing an awful lot, and Simon probably has more knowledge on the ESB network side of it than I would. And they're doing a lot of stuff at the moment, a lot of consultation around how they can meet that requirement in the future. But it's not simple. And there's a lot of stuff happening in the UK as well around smart charging and understanding smart charging and how that will happen overnight and have less impact on the grid. So there's lots of stuff up in the air. But I think in general you can see you can see it in the UK as well. There's so much happened because the issue as well is, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit here, but the issue as well is to make sure that everybody is facilitated, and that's the tricky bit, because as the market develops, lots of people will jump in, but they'll all jump into specific areas where it's commercially viable to do so, which is, you know, the cities and the urban areas. So how do you make sure there's a spread? And I think part of the plan that we're developing now, part of the reason I think when we put that to Climate Action Fund for funding was the fact that we're trying to do this nationally. We're not just going to focus where it's commercially viable to do it in the first place. I'm not fully answering your question there, I think, but it's the best I can give at the moment.
I think, just like you said, I mean, just from what I understand of the engagements I've had with ESB networks, I mean, for people that don't know about the Dingle project, I don't want to say too much about it here because we're going a bit over already on this particular section, but I mean, idea of the Dingle project is that it's kind of a microcosm of what the future network could look like and all of the inputs and outputs from that. So part of it is bringing a good number of EVs into that and looking at how you charge them, whether we're using vehicle to grid, smart metering and local generation activities as well. So that's the whole learning. The idea of that project is that it's a learning process that can then, you know, be looked at and then scaled out. Remains to be seen how that goes. Obviously, ESB Networks also just published the electrification of heat and transport strategy document, which is, you know, worth a look at, because a lot of people say, well, the grid isn't going to cope, but, you know, there's a lot of clever people out there thinking about how they're going to make this work, and there is a strategy. So there's a lot going on to make sure that the grid should be able to cope with 1 million electric vehicles, if indeed we get to that number, by 2030. And that's what, you know, we're working towards. There's a lot of other factors playing into that, of course, from, you know, manufacturers and pricing and consumer, you know, readiness. But I mean, the work, part of the work, which is making the grid ready for that, is being well thought about. So I feel positive about that. Okay, well, thank you very much, Conor. We'll take a few more questions on this topic later on, I'm sure. Shall we move on now to the next item in the agenda? Kevin, do you want to throw up the deck again, please? Okay, so the next section is the panel discussion. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we've brought together four players in the EV charging space, so installers and private network operators. So we've got Nigel Daley from NMB, Darren Kinsella from Darkin EV, Chris Kelly, who is EasyGo and CarCharger, and Jerome Flannery from Randridge. So guys, what I'll do first is I'll just ask you each to give a quick introduction, you know, introduce yourself, have a quick talk about, you know, what your business, where it's come from, what you're doing these days, and then we'll drop into some of the questions that we've had through in the last week. So, Jerome, I'll go to you first.
Hi guys, thanks for having me on. I suppose just to give a brief description on who we are. Some of you may know, some of you may not. Randridge Technology set up, they kind of entered the EV industry in 2018-19, and we set up our own CPO, charge point operating service, as a business known as Stop and Top. So in recent months, we've been installing robust chargers for our key clients and managing their operational use with the Stop and Top administration panel. We have partnered with a company called Verta Global, who are a cloud-based platform, and they have over 100,000 charge points on their network. Aside from that, our plan is, I suppose, to get in touch with the likes of the county councils and workplace and commercial and retail areas, where we have access to two of the largest roaming networks, with Hubject and Girev. Our first kind of plan is to roll out public charging for one of the county councils, and then start to discuss other areas with the likes of EasyGo and the ESB. Apart from that, we covered domestic and commercial industrial chargers. We've partnered with one of the main manufacturers in Europe called Enso, so we're able to provide those chargers in the Irish network. Partnering with Enso and Verta give us, I suppose, more opportunities to deliver the likes of the Delta ultra-fast chargers, 4-in-1 chargers, 3-in-1. Partnering with Verta gives us another option to bring in the tritium chargers into the Irish market. So it's mainly down to just discussions with county councils and seeing where they're going and what their plans are going to be. Of course, everything is going to go to tender. The likes of myself and EasyGo are probably the two that have gone to this rounds of providing our own infrastructure, having our own app, our own CPO and EMP status. So having that tied into the ESB, again, is offering Ireland, I suppose, all the EV owners in Ireland an opportunity to have an all-Ireland charging map. So it's not like Germany. You're not using 10 or 12 cards to get from one end of Germany to the other side. It's very important to have an ad hoc approach where anyone can use them. So that's one of our main key areas, is to kind of follow up with Chris, EasyGo and ESB, and to produce an all-Ireland charging map, an all-Ireland charging infrastructure where they can download our app, let it be EasyGo app, let it be ESB, and have interoperability through those. So it's just giving people a different option on what to use.
Okay, thank you very much. Darren, I'll go to you next.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, initially we're electrical contractors and electrical engineers, about 25, 26 years involved in the electrical industry. Then we installed our first charger, actually, I was told, in May 2016. And then when I first seen that going on, I got interested in the charging network ourselves. So we initially set up an entity of the group company itself, Darkin EV, back in 2018. So we officially sort of got into the EV market back then. Prior to that, we had done a lot of resource and training throughout Europe and the UK. We researched the products, what availability of the products, backup service, technical support. And also I represent a couple of committees from the Electrical Industry Standards and Contractors Association of Ireland. So I was adamant to make sure the quality of standards and equipment coming into the country and the quality of installs were done in properly to regulations. So a lot of our entity, although we do installs for domestic commercial, a lot of our entity is consultancy work, training, commissioning work. Like our guys here train commissioning for ABB, Schneider, FSS, DBT, all different manufacturers. So we have invested very heavy in the industry itself, from test kits to software to training. It was great before COVID-19. We used to enjoy traveling all over Europe, having a night away, getting a bit of training, a bit of education and certification. Going forward, we foresee going forward ourselves, we're in talks with a couple of European manufacturers to introduce different equipment and different ways of charging. So we're always proactive and we're always future-proof. And so our strategy plan, basically, we've a 5-year plan. So we have a hypothetical scenario from inductive charging to all types of strange and weird stuff that's available in America and different parts of Europe that we'll be looking to introduce here. And we also do a lot of work with training lads to install the units and commissioning, and we maintain a lot of private sectors. So although we're not necessarily up to Chris's standard at the moment, we will be hoping at some stage to roll out some sort of a public network. Again, we're a private company, so we have to make margins, we have to make profit. So we'll be cautious in how we actually roll it out. Again, any money we borrow or we have to pay back. We've other things in the pipeline where we do a lot of work with other charging people within Ireland ourselves. As I say, the more you get together, 2 brains are better than 1. So we're looking forward to the next 12 months. We have a lot of stuff introduced coming in mainstream in the next 12 months. I'll be interested to see how the market's going to diversify and change. As I say, a lot of the stuff is behind the scenes of what we do ourselves. We're very proactive in that type of way, but we're glad that any input we do have is beneficial to yourself and your members out there. And we look forward to bringing new, different scenarios into the industry going forward. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Thanks, Darren. Nigel Daley, we'll go to you next. So you're on mute, Nigel.
No, I'm okay now. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. We're an electrical contracting company started in 1983, so almost 40 years in business. Covered everything and over those years from all aspects, hospitals, shops, all of that. 2010, we were approached by ESB eCars to get involved with the charging infrastructure throughout the whole country. And we were installed the very first charger in Ireland in Clorina in Limerick in 2010. So we've been at it for 10, 11 years. Over that time, we've installed probably heading for about 6,000 chargers in domestic applications. And we've gone into commercial and industrial stuff as well. But unlike the other guys, we haven't gone down the road of getting involved with our own network or anything like that at the moment. We are in talks with companies like Darren and Jerome to try and improve that. But what we try to do is just to give the customer a good service and a good quality product. And to date, that has worked. And, I think our reputation speaks for itself. In terms of what we try to do is to engage with the customer and try and help them going forward and ask what will be the best application for them. Products, there's so many out there. It's we there's so many to choose from, but the products are all quite good. We use Zappi, EO, Garo. I find they're probably the best and the easiest for the customer to understand. So that's really where we are at the moment, guys.
Great, thanks very much, Nigel. So Chris Kelly, we'll give you an opportunity. Obviously, you started on the home charger side, but now EasyGo is a big network already. So tell us about that journey.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Good afternoon. So a little bit about the journey itself. Yeah, we started with the home charge points. What people may not understand or know about us is we actually still install a lot of EV charge points, home charge points. January alone, we've installed, I think, 117 charge points in homes. We also install for business, for fleet. We're finding fleet is becoming quite busy. Businesses that are off at the minute have access to carry out groundworks and car parks and stuff. So they're making the most of that during COVID to put the infrastructure in place for when employees do come back. And then, of course, we've got EasyGo. And I think everybody here knows about EasyGo or follows EasyGo online at some stage. We try to be proactive in what we promote online and what we're doing and what's coming down the line. We're very excited going forward now. We have a new 75 kilowatt charge point coming online, and we should be getting those in the next. You'll start seeing them in the streets in the next 2 to 3 months. We're particularly going to use these in our rollout of charge points to replace the air phone boxes. We started out, we've identified 180 sites. That's rolled out to, or expanded to over 250 sites now around the country. And around the same time, and it kind of missed the headlines, the bigger headlines, we signed a contract with Musgraves to roll fast chargers out into over 200 stores around the island, north and south. So we are going to be launching EasyGo in UK in the coming weeks, particularly for the UK owners and Northern Ireland. And you're going to see some of our chargers appearing across London and Scotland as well quite soon. So, you know, you may have read there, we took on major investment in the last short while to enable all of this and to make it happen. And we're looking at the next 3 years rolling out up to 500 fast charge points. And yeah, look, we're progressing quite well. You know, there's definitely challenges there, trying to find the sites, trying to deal with all of the personnel that you have to deal with, and councils and legislation and stuff on these sites to make it happen. But you know, we've made a great start on it, and we're over one of the biggest hurdles of getting started. So, yeah, we're looking forward to the next few years. It's going to be very, very busy in this space.
That's great, and it's great to see the progress that you've made. And I guess I'll put the first question to you then, Chris. Obviously, you've seen you putting in a lot of rapid chargers recently, but maybe in 1s and 2s. Are you looking at rolling out hub locations yourselves?
Yeah, we are. And a lot of the discussions that we're having, even though you might see one charge point go in, what you may not see is the infrastructure and groundworks that goes in behind it. It's very positive to see that on most of the sites, one charge point is probably sufficient on a lot for the moment, but a lot of the site owners, they see that there is going to be a need for more than one charge point, so they will actually put in the groundworks to make it very easy to add more charge points as they're needed. And as we grow, because we're a private entity as well, we don't get state funding for doing what we're doing. And it makes it quite difficult to choose the locations and put in multiples on sites, because we need a return on those sites to enable us keep the charge points in the network running. Now, is there a point in putting in 3, 4, 5 charge points on a site? At the moment, you typically see one and maybe another car waiting to use a charge point when it's done. You don't see 4 or 5 cars in one location waiting to charge. But we're monitoring that through our software. As we see things get busier and as we see cars plugging in directly after the next one, well, then we know, okay, there's a market here for fitting another charge point and utilizing that. But we have to have a particular turnover rate through the charge points to make them financially viable. Hopefully the government step up and start making some more funding available. You know, the Climate Action Fund is something it's a massive fund that's still there. It has been there all along, but nothing has been done with it. I know the guys in eCars did receive 10 million of that. And you know, you can see the fruits of that because there's charge points being fitted around the place at the minute, and there's charge points being upgraded and sites being upgraded. But there needs to be a lot more of that funding released and released across the board. And I'm not saying it released to EasyGo, I'm saying released across the board. You hear the other guys moving in this space as well, which is great to see. There is so much room out there for more charge points. And I can tell you now, EasyGo will not have the time or the energy to fit them all. So the more the merrier at the moment.
Yeah, it's great to hear that you've put in groundworks to allow additional charges at the locations that you've worked with already. I think that's very positive. And I always think that right sizing the network is really important, and making massive investment in rapid charging units and then finding them sitting there not being used, and then maybe finding 2 years later you need to upgrade it, isn't the right thing to do. Okay, let me then jump back to some questions around the home charging side of things. So Nigel, let me come to you. And a question we're quite often asked these days is, if I'm installing a home charger right now, is it worth me in considering a smart charger, or is it still too soon to think about that?
No, I think the smart charger is well. It depends on what your application is going to be, but I think the smart charger for sure is the way to go, because invariably, people want to have some control over it. They want to use an app. They want to be able to check functionality and all of that. And if they're doing solar and PV, well, then the smart charger then can utilize all of that through battery packs and whatever. I think it's all about the monitoring and making sure that it's capable of doing what it says. But equally, the smart charger will invariably give you a built-in load management facility, which is a huge help. It eliminates having to fit additional priority devices and things like that. So the EO and Zappi would be my preference at the moment for those. And of course, the Garrow one is available as well. But they're the ones that we use, and by a country mile, the Zappi one is the most popular at the moment.
Yeah, because I guess one of the things that we kind of see in the UK already is obviously they're down the road with smart metering and so on, and more granular energy tariffs, and that makes having a smart meter much more useful. And I guess that's something we expect to see here in Ireland within the next few years. So if you're installing now, it's certainly worth thinking about doing that, because it will give you the flexibility you need down the line.
Yeah, agreed. And now, as Darren has said there, it's all about just keeping up to speed with things and what's available and what's coming down the track. And we all try to do that. And then ultimately, everybody's goal, is to help the customer and make sure everything is functioning and they're getting value for money. But most importantly, that there's a backup there and that they understand how to operate the product. That's the main thing.
Great, thanks. And Darren, coming to you, and I know that you're not alone in doing this, but you obviously supply a lot of EO and Zappi chargers, and they're very prominent in the market now. Can you compare and contrast the product offerings there, and maybe any other really good ones that you might recommend to people considering installing a home charger at the moment?
Well, again, it's, as Nigel was saying, we've seen such a difference. For Zappi was completely and utterly had 99% of the market for many, many years, version 1 and the version 2. And even with the quite large increase in price between version 1 and version 2, from our point of view, being qualified and being trained and installers, we understood the differentiation between the different units. The technology was a lot different, the PEM protection, the DC leakage, the software updates. It's, it can sometimes, it does come down to financial investment. It is quite a large financial investment, although there is the €600 available from SEAI for the grant. So it takes a sting out of the tail. And then, as you're saying, we're going forward with different technology going forward. It is important to have the technology. When cars are introduced, the new Model 3 came out, there was an issue there with the snooze mode, or the car was hibernating, the charger wouldn't wake up. That just had to be a software update, and some of the chargers themselves had to get a software update. So the pros and cons about it, it's very difficult really. It's one car to another car. If do you want to buy a Nissan Leaf or do you want to buy a Tesla? And chargers can be like that. Like I see behind me there, the new ABB chargers, the AC all box charger coming on stream. Now that's a fantastic charger. It has all the bells and whistles. It'll make you a cup of tea if you wanted to make a cup of tea. But from a financial thing, it is a little bit more expensive when you start adding in the RFID, the back office, the Wi-Fi connection, the 4G connections, SIM cards to go into it. So again, car chargers, I definitely think car chargers can be like cars. You can just get one that plugs and goes and off you go. But if you're a little bit more techie into it and you want to try and future-proof with the built-in load balancing, also coming down the stream is, yourself in the UK, all the car chargers in the UK over the last couple of years through the OLED scheme had to qualify for the smart charging. And one of the main focuses and reasons for that was nationally they want to try and grid limit it through working in conjunction with the smart metering. Hypothetically, in the next 15, 20 years, Ireland could have a similar scenario here, that we could have 15 chargers, 15 houses in the cul-de-sac, and they all charge at the same time, and they all go in and click on the kettle on out the street. And before we know it, we have a brownout or a complete and utter blackout. So we have to have smart technology going forward. And I think with most of the chargers sold in the Irish market now, and most people that drive an EV or plug-in hybrids, they've done the market research. They've looked at the cars. They're well aware that the financial commitment they have to make to buy the car and the financial commitment they have to make to buy the charger that's suitable for their car or suitable for their needs. So like, I don't have a strong enough argument to compete between what's best, what's not best. Like, I'm involved in the market. Our office out the back here it's like something you would have seen from MacGyver. We have chargers from every manufacturer throughout the world taken apart, put back together, fixed and broke. You know, there's not one particular, well, there is one, but I can't even mention now that we'd be afraid to have in the office. You know, that's just how the market has evolved itself going forward. So it is very difficult. I couldn't pinpoint it. Like, we consult and we recommend multiple manufacturers to customers, because we can go to one customer at 9 o'clock in the morning and they require a specific product, specific setup, specific back office. Their usage, either their clients, their customers, or themselves, their own usage, it's different from the next client we see at 10 o'clock. So, you know, I'm just blessed that we have technology out there and all the different manufacturers and the different installers and commission agents here in Ireland that can offer such a great broad spectrum of people. Like, our main mentos here in Darkin EV is that we give choice. We don't give you a charger, we give you a choice. So we'd have a pretty decent broad spectrum of units we use ourselves. Right, I've gone on the question there and I probably forgot even what it was.
No, that's great. That's great. Okay. Just so I'll come back to you, Jerome, next. And obviously, one of the scenarios that comes up quite a lot is someone wants to get an EV and maybe they live in an apartment, or they only can, they can't park right next to their house. They don't have a driveway. So what's your experience in those situations of being able to help those sort of people? And, is it viable to own an EV if you can't if you don't have a driveway?
Well, I think, like, take example, apartment block solutions. I know the SEI are planning on rolling out 2 options for apartment block owners. The hardest thing in an apartment block is the heavy lifting of it. So getting containment and cabling from the main ESP boardroom out to that person's car park. That's the most expensive part in the installation. And the one thing the management company will ask us is, who's going to pay for this? How do we charge the apartment owners for this part? So that's one of the main, I suppose, heavy costs in it in relation to apartments. Don't get me wrong, if your car parking space is beside the ESP room, you're elected, a couple of 10, 15 meters, people will pay for that. But we just see in I suppose, lately is the person that has to install a charge point 40, 50 meters down the car park, and who's going to pay for all this containment to go in? So a lot of the time, the management companies are coming to us and saying, well, is there some sort of deal you can do? Is there a leasing option, a communal charge point option? Yeah, they're all there. But again, it's who's going to upfront the first payment. How are they going to get back that money? So I think the SEI is definitely on a winner with bringing out, they're looking at 60% of the cost covered for the cable containment and stuff. And if that's the case, if you can get everything pre-wired for a car charging in an apartment block, all the EV owner will have to pay for is the charger and the cable and the connection in the meter cabinet. So every apartment block is the same, is more so the same. You'll have a main meter room with all with the ESP supply, their main switch fuses, and you can come from there. It's not called a branch connection if you do it by the safe electric regulations. So I think that the SEI, with to bring out these 2 options, you will see a massive change in the apartment blocks, even multi-story car parks. Some questions we're getting now is for surface parking. So likes of Wise Property Management, who have 118 apartments and a couple of houses in one estate, they're now looking for us in particular just to come along, do a survey, get an ESP cost of a new mini pillar to be put in, and put in communal charging. And they don't want anything got to do with it, because they're never going to be able to pass them costs onto the people in the housing estate. So they want us to lease the whole package, the ESP, mini pillar, the civil works, the chargers, and then bill the users for the usage. And like Chris was saying, you're kind of waiting on people to use the chargers for you to get back that cost. And if you're looking at putting in 4 or 5 chargers in a communal area, you could be looking at anywhere from 10, 15, 20 grand, and you're going to be looking at a payback of 6 to 10 years, again, depending on how many cars are in there. So from this side of point, you'd be hoping that the SEI will bring in a lot more incentives for the likes of communal charging and for apartment blocks.
Yeah, and there's obviously a huge challenge there, and I think regulations now in place for new build apartments, so that they have to prepare, you know, to make sure the cabling's there and so on, so that if you want to fit a charger, and that's great, but there's an awful lot of existing buildings out there that just aren't ready, and there has to be funding in place to enable that. And like you say, the first person that asks at the moment is kind of hit with a brick wall, and they find that they can't get anywhere because the landlord or whoever can't make that investment, or it's too difficult or whatever. So I think there's some challenges there, but I mean, the solutions are on the way, I think is the message.
Yeah.
Okay, one more question. Running a bit long on time, but more questions. So just around, I think a question around fleet, and we'll come to each of you. So I'll go back to you first, Chris. You mentioned a little bit there already about your experiences with fleet. So I don't know if you can mention specific companies or not, but that doesn't really matter. But is that building out locations where, you know, we're seeing, you know, delivery companies and things like this where they are going to use electric vehicles? Is that something that's happening more and more?
Yeah, it is. We're seeing delivery companies and the likes, you know, getting involved. We're seeing some of the bigger companies, the bigger building companies, for instance, and we're seeing a lot of directors in companies getting electric cars, and a lot of senior people in company getting electric cars. Vans not so much at the moment, because the vehicles just aren't out there. Yes, you've seen on Post, you know, take on charge points. They've got 500 EVs at the minute, thereabouts. But there is a shortage of vehicles, and that's Ireland and the UK. I know UK, you can't get a van this year in the UK because British Gas have bought them all up. And it's going to be the same in Ireland. It's going to be a few years before the vans come in. But definitely with cars, there has to be a proper fleet solution. Jerome mentioned it there, the interoperability is a big thing. And we're finding quite similarly with the interoperability. Fleets don't want to get involved with having a load of different cards and a load of different things to manage for their employees. They want it easy for their employees, and you couldn't blame them, because, you know, they're used to handing an employee a DCI card and saying, okay, there you go, off you go to work, and we'll get one bill at the end of the month. And so it's providing solutions like that. We're finding is being very interesting at the moment, but it's smart solutions, solely because there's billing involved, solely because there's a lot of different operators at the moment. And there's going to be more operators in the space. But yeah, fleets are quite happily getting involved. And it's going to grow quite quickly over the next couple of years. Again, as Jerome said, car parks and the likes, you know, having car parks and parking at home. If I drive a company car, I don't want to be relying on just the public network. I still want to charge at home. and there has to be smart charging at home to allow for that. But if I live in an apartment, I need to be able to charge my vehicle, and that's my work vehicle as well. So there's a lot of dots still to join. The SAI still have a lot more work to do in joining the dots and making it run smoothly. But again, to come back to funding, this can't be funded solely by private operators. It absolutely can't be funded because there's too many dots to be joined, and too many people have their own couple of dots that they're working on. There needs to be somebody to take control and spend the money to join them all, and or to allow us to join them all.
Yeah, I think we've had some discussions about whether there should be a specific sort of charging infrastructure regulator specifically to deal with that, because obviously it's going to blow up massively in the next decade. And as you say, if things are just allowed grow organically, then we might see what we see maybe in other places in Europe where it's very fragmented. But, okay.
It's true, you know.
Thanks very much.
Only going to grow. Oh yeah, sorry, Simon.
No, go on. If you've got a point, go on. Finish your point.
No, sorry, no, I was just going to say, they're only going to grow where people can get some payback on it. You know, as Jerome said, they're not going to put charge points in an apartment block where there's no payback. We all want to do it. We'd love to have EasyGo hubs out there with 4 and 5 fast chargers around the country, but it's not going to pay us to do it. And as private companies, if it's not going to pay us to do it, well, then we can't survive as a company by doing it.
Okay, thanks very much, guys, for your participation. We've run a bit long, but hopefully that's given everyone a good feeling for, you know, the breadth of knowledge and experience we've got here with the charge operators in Ireland. And guys, if you can hang on to the Q&A session at the end, I'm sure there'll be more questions for you. Let's move on then to the next presentation. Simon Vogt from Uncharge, who is working on incentivization of charging elsewhere in Europe, is going to talk to us about what he's doing and the plans for expansion of that service. Thank you, Simon.
Great. Thank you, Simon, for having me. Hi together. It's a pleasure to join this very interesting, exciting panel. Yes, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Encharge, our EV startup, and a few words to my person. I'm Simon, one of the founders of Encharge, and I'm in this EV business since around more than 10 years. I started my interesting journey back in the days 2011 with BMW. I was mainly working on home charging at that time with the BMW i topics, and then I was with Porsche, the car manufacturer, the last 5 years, and I was then responsible for the Porsche charging service, so the Porsche EMP. And from that time, I'm a little bit familiar with the Irish market. So we had some discussions with the ESB guys, having interoperability, connecting to them via Giraffe. So quite nice journey. And let me share a couple of slides. And so let's see what we can do, of course, in Ireland as well. So I try to share. I think it should work smoothly. There we go. Can you see my slides? Is it working?
Yeah, I see it.
Oh, great. Wonderful. So let's jump into it. And regarding, mainly, of course, try to present you the idea about Encharge and the why. So why are we doing what we're doing? And of course, how could your users, your EV drivers in the Irish market can participate of Encharge? And as said, thanks, Simon, for the introduction, of course, for the invitation. As Simon briefly introduced, we are a kind of loyalty program. So we started with that 1 year ago. And the EV drivers here in our 5 European markets, they know us as the first loyalty program for free public charging. And how this works, I'll explain on the next slides. On this, I'd like to just give you a couple of guidelines, some key facts. So we are 3 founders from Encharge. We have around 800 partners on e-commerce on the platform. live in 5 European markets. So mainly the DACH region, like with Switzerland and Austria and Belgium, Netherlands are connected as well. And we're currently evaluating and roll out into UK and maybe Ireland this year. So therefore it fits perfectly that we're discussing today. Yeah, so let me jump into. So why are we doing what we are doing? So as said, I was dealing with EMP or MSP private charging mainly for 3 years with Porsche. And we experienced a lot, especially a lot of pain points from the EV driver point of view. And we really try to make charging and the journey more attractive and bring more value to the waiting time. So what are you doing while the car is charging? So that's basically our target and the mission. Therefore, we see ourselves as a puzzle part in this complex ecosystem of CPOs, EMPs, roaming partners, site partners, and so there are many, many stakeholders in it. And we try to bring benefit to the B2B partners, CPOs, MSPs, as well as to the EV driver. So I think you are kind of aware. I just saw the prices for public charging, I think for ESB. If we would have those prices in Germany, I think everybody would be happy. For example, in here we have got Ionity with 79 cents up to €1.10 per kilowatt hour for HPC 350 kW. And so we see that the charging price is really a barrier, a hurdle for the EV adoption in Europe. So this was the first thing we thought, okay, we need to solve the charging price. It must be cheaper to charge publicly, must be maybe on the same level, like as you know this from private charging. So this is the first point why we launched and charge. And the second pillar, the second thing we were discussing is this waiting time. So this is it's cool because it's not a pain point, it's an potential, because there's a new thing. As an EV driver, you need to wait from 15 minutes to a couple of hours until the car is fully charged. And that time is very nice to promote offers from site partners, for example, coffee for free, to do cross and upselling. So this is basically pretty much the foundation of InCharge. And what are we in this game? So we are a tech company mainly working with a tech platform, and we're serving both. We have got B2C customers. This is the EV driver, and for the EV driver, we have got an app available on the App Store. And with this app, the EV driver can deal with our loyalty program, with a bonus program. And I stated that we started on the public field, and we're currently moving to the private use case. And I just heard some discussions you had on the panel, very exciting. And with ESB, we would like to be alongside the complete customer journey. So we're currently extending the business to private charging, and we have a cool feature regarding wallbox sharing. This was launched this week in Germany. I have some insights on that afterwards. And then on the B2B side, for players like ESB, we can serve as a B2B partner. So we stay in the background, and the customer, the user, stays with ESB or with the EMP. So we don't want to own the EV driver. The EV driver is still with the EMP. And we basically just provide APIs, interfaces, that the EMP partner can offer value-added services or new features to the EV drivers. So what we are working on with the platform, or where we are focusing on, so we have got 3 major topics. The first thing I mentioned is the loyalty program. So we offer really free public charging. The mechanism and the business model I have on the next slides. And the second thing is that we think charging is still not really, let me say, sexy. It's a process. You have cable, Mod 3, then you have got HPC, and it's very, very technical. You have different apps, and we see high potential for things like gamification. So this is something where you really engage the user, and where you really you get a smile from the user if you have some nice gamification features in your app. And the third thing we are focusing on is experiences, like location-based services. And we have some corporations in Germany with like Edeka. It's a retail partner, I think, like Tesco. I think this might be a partner in Ireland, where we combine charging and shopping. How does our business model work? So, of course, we can't give anything away for free. We need to find some revenue streams. And so we got a cool stream. We have built this platform, as said, reconnecting partners. And I initially stated we have got 800 e-commerce partners. And we promote, you see this in here, we promote our partners on our platform. So we do kind of advertisement for them in front of our EV drivers, of the users. And for that advertisement, we get a commission. We get a fee, or we take a fee, and one part stays with us. And the biggest part will be forwarded as charging credits. So this is the free charging budget to our users. And we call it not bonus points, we call it kilometers. So it's end charge kilometer, and 1 kilometer is 0.08. So that's the principle, and that's a very nice and cool mechanism. What currently is running, we have around 50,000 users on the platform, and we see that there's a high demand for this free charging, and we see that it runs pretty smooth so far. How does it work in detail? What is the journey? So as said, we have got this Encharge app. We have got e-commerce partners on the platform. I think you might not know Otto. It's one of the biggest e-commerce platforms in Germany. You can get like everything there, whatever you like. And so it's a very attractive shop. We arrange different deals with the partners. You can see in here 1 kilometer per €3 turnover. And so it calculates based on the turnover on the basket. And then the EV driver, they get rewarded with those kilometers. In this case, they received 144 kilometers, and this is equal to 12 to 13 euro. And that's the charging budget which can be transferred, forwarded to the EMP partner app, and then charging is basically for free. That's the working principle for the loyalty. Regarding gamification, I think you guys are pretty much aware, you are experts. Content is a problem, right? To have curated content on the charging station. I think the ESB colleague, Conor, you already mentioned that dynamic data is key. To have a dynamic status, that is key. But of course, there are a couple of further needs from the user to see the picture. Where can I charge? Is there enough space? Is there a cable attached? How does the station look like? What is there a display? Is there something around? And so during my time at Porsche, we were searching for content, for pictures, but we couldn't find those. So we invested a lot in buying pictures. And so we, with Encharge, we thought, okay, let's maybe turn it around. And the EV driver, they are at the station anyhow. So they're at the station. And we started to ask them, please take 4 pictures from the station, 1 from the front, from the parking space, from the entrance, and from the surrounding. And we reward them with charging credits. And this basically leads to pretty crazy days. So in the last year, in the summertime, around June, we got more than 1,000 pictures a day. And there was competitions on the blogs, like who got more. At that day, as I think this is a little bit over, around 80,000 pictures available in the market. And this is something where I really get the smile of the EV driver, because they're there anyhow. They can just take a picture and they get charging credits, which then can be reused for free public charging again. So that's a pretty cool one, what we really like, and we see the engagement in the community. Third thing I mentioned is this experience, so location-based. You, of course, you know Booking.com, so we have a cooperation with Booking. We arranged the hotels and matched them with the charging stations, so you can see if you plan a route where you can charge and have your stay. And as said, in Germany, like you can compare Edeka to Tesco, we have a nice cooperation where Edeka pays the charging session, and we handle, let me say, the processes in the background. Maybe you might know a couple of those partners. So this is basically our current partner setting in terms of EMPs. So we have a mixture of, let me say, national EMPs. This is like EMBW or those Maingos, and then international, like Plug Surfing, you will know, the Porsche charging service, you will know. And so this is pretty much our current footstep. Of course, we like to extend to the markets and find some partners who'd like to work with us. I'm now jumping into the use cases, and I think this is something what, of course, might be interesting for you, because you might ask yourself, okay, how could this work for my user, or I am a CPO, what is there for benefit, or I'm an EMP? And I try to really bring up the different use cases you have, starting with the profiles, private, public charging, customer type, B2C, B2B, and then I try to really bring out the let me say, the portfolio you have in mind on a very high level. Of course, there might be other things, but this is something what we mainly discuss with the partners. So they are offering private energy contract for charging at home, nothing special. They're offering wall boxes for charging at home, offering EMP products for B2C, B2B. They're offering charging stations at retail partners. So they install, they run, they maintain those charging stations. And they have got the charging station operations. So B2B with an operations system, and they need to put a high focus on high availability. So I think you guys, you are EV drivers, and I have loads of stories where charging was not possible due to 1,000 issues, back end off, connector, you name it, you know that. So basically those are pretty much maybe hopefully your use cases, and I then mapped the services we can have or the use cases we can realize, and that can fit to your needs somehow or to the needs of your users. So like we offer this free charging. I have a detailed slide where I really explain how this works, how could this work. We have got this shopping and charging connection. Wallbox sharing feature is something what is very interesting. We have got something regarding optimized operations, and then we have got charging credits for private energy. For the day, due to the time, I would focus on those four use cases. The first one in here, as you can see, is this free charging use case. And the idea is basically that we have a backend connection with the EMP partner, and your EMP user connects once with our app, and then we channel the available budget to the EMP partner. And the journey is that the EMP partner should not change the behavior. So they will continue to use the normal EMP app, but there's, let me say, just is for free, because the user can pay with the collected kilometers coming from our ecosystem. So that's basically the working principle and the mechanism. And as said, you see some partners in here. So you see in here account connected. So we connect the accounts, and then the mechanism is working. And why is that interesting? From an let me say EMP or CPO point of view, what we see from the facts, the EMP and the CPO, they can increase the utilization, so they can sell more energy. And I think that's a very interesting KPI. The partner we started with, we know from the dashboards, from the statistics, that around 1 out of 3 charging sessions are paid with kilometers. So that's a very high value, and we see that the partners can really sell more energy to their users for public charging. Sorry. And so this is a pretty beneficial one, what works very nice in our 5 markets we have here in Germany. So the very, let me say, basic service we have on the platform. If we go further to the next one, this is shopping and charging. I think this is, of course, many retailers currently investing in charging infrastructure. So they have got really a strategy on e-mobility, and it's something that is key for the adoption of EVs. And I think you are aware charging will happen wherever you are. And of course, if you shop once a week for 30, 40 minutes, of course, charge your car is essential, is cool, makes fun. And if you have a nice combination of shopping and charging, you as a CPO, the EV driver, and the retail partner, then there is a win-win-win for everybody in this ecosystem. And so this is something what we like to do. We try to be so we don't want to install chargers, we just like to be the backend which can connect charging and shopping. So for this case here we have in Germany, it works like that the EV driver shops as normal, charges as normal, and just take a picture of the receipt. And then everything is done automatically. So we have an artificial intelligence software scans the receipt, and then we can let me say reward with charging credits as well. Furthermore, the wallbox sharing use case, this is something what I like pretty much. And I think I'm looking forward to the discussion we can have. I don't know how this is handled in Ireland. In Germany, we see that there's a high demand, but we have got very strict requirements and laws in Germany. The calibration law, the Eichrecht, We have got requirements regarding the pricing. So public charging based on minutes or flat is not allowed in Germany anymore. So it's just only allowed is kilowatt hours. And so it's very complex to offer your private wallbox to the public. So we thought, okay, we have this platform, we have got around 15,000 users, and we have got the kilometers, we have got a currency somehow. And so we thought, okay, let's use our marketplace and connect the wallbox owners with the guests. And it's not, let me say, roaming on Hubject, it's really in the community of Encharge network. So we don't want to have the San Francisco businessman charging at my home. It should be like neighbors or your friends, your family. This is the target from ourselves. And so we started this week. We already have around 100 hosts on the platform. They're offering the wallbox. And we started cooperation with Easy Wallbox. Maybe you know them from Norway. They have a nice wallbox. So we are connected to the backend, and you can start stop charge via our app, and the transaction is done totally automated, and you can pay with, and this means that there's no cost in the system. So either for the guest or for the host, nobody needs to pay any fees. So therefore it's very interesting, and we meet the strict German government laws by offering that. And of course, this could be something for you if you are a wallbox provider, something of course which you can offer as a further feature for users, which can of course interactivize the full service, because the user can do something for the community, and of course can earn a little bit of money because they can sell the energy run through the charging sessions. The fourth and the last basically use case I'd like to present today is the optimized operations, and this is mainly focusing on your B2B operations. The idea is that you can increase the availability of the charging station and decrease the operation cost by sending technicians. We started this in Germany. Maybe you know EnBW. It's a big German CPO and EMP. And we make use of our photo mechanism. And we created a survey assessment, and the EV driver at the station should answer a couple of questions. For example, was the charging session successful? Is there litter at the charging station? Is display okay? Do you have got anything to add? So we added a 5-star rating. We added yes/no questions, and for every finished challenge, there will be charging credit rewarded again. And we have a technical connection to the backend of the CPO, so to the backend system, and the data will flow directly to the backend, and they will evaluate it, and this directly runs to the process, to the system, to increase the availability. So if there are issues in the field, so they can directly act and solve it, and they can really save the money by sending out technicians, because the EV driver will do the assessment and not the technician. So that's a very cool one. This is pretty much focusing on B2B. Of course, it has impacts on B2C, because the EV driver is happier if the infrastructure is available. And we see the first feedbacks. I just checked the app. We have got a channel where the users say, oh, that's a cool one, so I can contribute to the community. I can do something for the others, that e-mobility will be successful. The market footprint.
Simon,
Sorry.
I just couldn't. Just to say, can you please wrap up in a couple of minutes so we have a little bit of time for the Q&A at the end? That'd be great. Sorry, I hate to do that, but just if you can.
No worries. No, I'm fine. I think just 2 slides to go, and then we can close the session and jump to the Q&A. Is that
perfect?
Yeah, cool, great. Of course. So just the market coverage, I think so far the 5 markets I mentioned, this is something we're currently evaluating, and I'm into deep in the UK rollout, and I could really imagine that we can link those UK and Ireland. And for that, of course, I need to go a little bit more into deep, but I think this is something we can take afterwards in the next weeks, a month. This is something from the EMP or CPO overview, but I don't want to go into deep. I think I would skip that. And I would just finish by adding this slide, just some KPIs. I said we have got this 15,000 registered users, around 1.5 million collected kilometers in the first year, what was pretty great. And then I would just say regarding timing, thank you very much for the attention. Of course, we sent the presentation afterwards, which with a couple of more information. And thank you so far.
Thank you very much, Simon. Sorry to rush you there at the end.
That's okay.
Apologies to everyone. We know we're running long. We just want to give everyone, as they've given time to us very well on a Saturday afternoon, we just want to give everyone time to talk. So we'll jump now into the Q&A session. We'll aim to finish by 4 o'clock. Kevin, over to you.
Yeah, hey folks. So I'll ask 2 or 3 questions, which is probably the max we'll have time for, and then I'll pass it over to Simon just to wrap it up and close us out at 4. If you need to drop off, that's okay. We'll upload all this to YouTube afterwards, so don't worry, you won't miss anything. So I suppose, but I've been monitoring the questions as they came in on the forum and in the chat itself, so that's where this is all coming from. So appreciate all the comments and questions from folks who are dialed in. That's really helpful for us. I suppose the first question that I'll have for this has sort of come up a bunch of times is I asked Chris this, or asked Conor this, sorry, earlier, but I think I'll open it to the wider group of speakers we had, especially from the panel, where are we learning any lessons as the grid gets more demanded upon, where we have more charging infrastructure, more cars, and people kind of deciding how they get a charger into a car park in their apartment complex versus homes, or just using public infrastructure? Are we learning any lessons from places like Norway who've done this really well? Like Chris spoke at length about how they're rolling out to car parks in shopping centres across the island. Simon obviously is talking about how he has this infrastructure going across. How do we think about this in Ireland's context, where obviously the government wants 1 million EVs by 2030? Are we able actually to have that? Is that going to put too much stress on the grid? Should we be considering people charging at nighttime and vehicle to grid stuff and all the kind of infrastructure questions around that? I'll throw it to Chris first, and if anyone else has any thoughts on this, please chime in.
Yeah, thanks for posing the questions, I suppose. It is a tricky one. Is the grid going to be able for it? Yeah, I think the grid will be able for it. And probably the easiest way to make it happen is through incentives. You know, there's energy is generated throughout the day, 24 hours of the day. Different periods is going to be different costs in generating it, and you know, generators wanting to offload electricity. We see in the UK, there was periods there last summer, where people were actually being paid to take electricity from the grid and top up their cars. It wasn't a whole lot, but it beats paying the usual 18 cents per kilowatt when you're at home, or per kilowatt hour when you're at home. I think that smart metering and smart billing needs to be brought in. You know, the easiest way to incentivize people is through cost and through the pocket. And you know, people are going to be using their cars 365 days of the year. You might only be saving €1, €2 per day by charging at different times and at the best times to utilize power on the grid. But it's changes like that that people watch out for, and changes like that that people adhere to and adopt to. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest changes. As I said, there's lots of power out there to be used. Might not be at peak times, but there's lots of power at other times.
Yeah, that's fair. Any other thoughts from anyone else? Cool. I'll move on. This might be for Darren or Nigel specifically, but again, if anyone else has a thought on this, let me know. But again, bunch of questions around this topic, but I think a lot of people think part of the dream here is going to a cheap public charging space, charging your car, coming home, and then topping up your house. Either a battery that's running the house at night, or there was a specific example around heat pumps. How far away are we from that type of infrastructure and that type of, I suppose, dream where you've got a car that doesn't need the amount of battery it has for commuting to work tomorrow, but you can use the battery to do other bits and pieces in the house?
Well, if I may, I'll just start. Like, I can see it in the chat room there. There's a lot of discussion there, and Jeremy mentioned something there about the vehicle to grid technology. There is a lot of pilot schemes ongoing at the moment, ourselves included. We have a number of schemes. There's actually one where we hope to have up and running by the end of this month in conjunction with ABB. initially it's the cost. If you look at hypothetically 10, 15,000 euros for the piece of equipment. Now, a lot of them are bi-directional. But again, as Chris was stating, Ireland does generate a lot of electricity at certain times. There is certain times throughout the day, week, month, or year that we need to offload that energy. In a perfect scenario, we're looking at storage, battery storage, whether it's stored in the cars or it's stored in acres upon acres of sophisticated battery and cooling system. In a perfect scenario, again, and there's plenty of feasibility studies done with Renault and Nissan and all the manufacturers there. There's a great study I read there recently in Paris where they're working with the Renault Zoes. Yep, that can happen. Now, unfortunately, in Ireland, we have the CRU, we have the regulatory authorities, we have many, many different regulations and requirements that it doesn't allow us to do it straight off the bat. We have to adhere to different terms and conditions. We have to synchronize them within the power. We can't go and let a customer plug in a 40 kilowatt or 64 kilowatt car and then try and offload 40 kilowatts into the grid. It just doesn't suit the infrastructure. It's just not there at the moment. We have multiple issues, safety issues and electrical requirements still to adhere to. But in a hypothetical scenario, and again, this will happen in the future, that would be the perfect scenario where at certain times of the day, we're generating a lot of electricity. You can buy it at cheaper tariffs. Now, again, it'll only work in conjunction with smart metering and smart chargers. But if you look at a scenario that, one of the customers we're working with at the moment, they have gigawatts, 10 gigawatts of electricity available at certain times throughout the day. Hypothetically, they're looking to charge about 20 cars, maybe 40, 50, 60 kilowatt batteries. Then if you look at the scenario that customer, that user of the vehicle drives home with a fully charged battery, or maybe he's depleted by 5 or 10%, he still hypothetically has 35, 40, 50, 60 kilowatts. He puts in about 15, 20 kilowatts into his house battery storage. From there, then that generates, he goes upstairs, jumps into his shower, pulls 9.5 kilowatts for a half an hour, or any of his teenagers, they're in there for an hour, 2 hours. So there's 18, 24 kilowatts of energy gone straight away. The kettle goes on, the battery goes on. You depreciate your battery by a certain quantity. Again, then you chop up the car battery at night, you top up the house battery at an off-peak rate. You drive into work, you get another little bit in work, you come back home, and that scenario rotates. So you're basically, there is a situation here. We've applied a scheme ongoing here at the moment, and there's a customer of ours that's self-sufficient. Now, to get to that scenario, it's tens and tens of thousands of pounds at the moment. But again, if you look back in the very first electric vehicle came out, the cost of batteries, infrastructure, the price of the chargers, initially when the car dealerships were rolling out the chargers, they were paying 10, 15, 20,000 pounds for a charger that equivalent today, not even equivalent today, is a far more sophisticated charger today, is a tenth of that. So it is going there, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. I've been involved with a lot of pilot schemes at the moment, and again, there's a few more going on this year we're doing, and it's exciting. It's something that gets me up out of bed in the morning. That's the entity that I've always wanted to see in the market going forward. I would, in a perfect scenario, if I had a few quid spare and I had the space, I'd do it at home myself if I could get the red tape cut through the CRU and the ESB in conjunction with the ESB. But it is there. It's coming on stream. Might be this year, might not be next year, but it will be here at some stage. So we'll be looking at self-sufficiency. The other thing about that too, and we've seen it with some of the pilot schemes going on in the UK, it could come to a fact that it is a requirement that we, ESB networks, the DSO suppliers, would require that we can sort of, it's like data centers, basically, that we could have all our little mini substations dotted around the place, from one house to another house, to a housing state, north, south, west, east of this country, where we could have our own backup supply required. So at certain peaks of the day, it's there. And again, if you look at the smart meters and the feed-in tariffs, potentially that could be coming downstream. It's not going to pay for itself, but, it could subsidize some sort of your motoring needs. So in theory, we've looked at studies, we've looked at calculations. You could go and drive for free going down the line. Thanks.
That's a great answer. Thanks, Darren. You heard it here first. So solar PV, battery storage cost, all that will mean you can have half-hour showers. All good. The final question asked, just for the sake of time, it's slightly contentious, so we might have to cut people off, is this idea of the responsibility of who educates the market around all of this stuff. So it's a thing we see in the association. My email that's on the association URL actually gets a bunch of questions every month, at least, where it's someone asking, or I bought an EV, now what? It's this idea of like, do I have to get 12 cards? Like, what do I do with them? We've talked about it in the association, about like, how do we better educate people? And is it the responsibility of the internet as a wider, broader concept of Facebook groups, the EV Association, and the other ones around Europe? Or should we be asking dealers to do more of this? Like, who owns the responsibility of telling people about all of this technology and all of this stuff? Again, there's a bunch of questions around this. I think it's something that everyone's experienced. I'll open it up to whoever wants to take that one first.
Well, I've talked enough, but I guess being a used EV dealer, I can talk from the fact that educating people as you hand the cars over to them is critical in their enjoyment and getting the most out of those vehicles. So I think there is a huge onus on car dealers to fill part of that void at the very least. Of course, a lot of people are proactive and get their information from the internet and other sources, but for every person like that, there's someone, as you say, who goes to pick up their car from the dealer and they're not given the information they need. And yeah, they either find places like our Facebook group and get the answers they need there by hook or by crook, or they fail and they don't enjoy their experience, which is a terrible shame, I think, because it does happen. So I would say dealers have a huge part to play in this, and I think it's starting to move. I think, you know, as the next few years go on, I think the people in the dealerships are starting to realise that they ain't going to be selling any more diesel or petrol cars, so they'd better cop on and start, you know, doing as good a job at selling and handing over EVs as they do with their other cars.
Yeah, no, good answer. And if there's a dealer that is relying on petrol and diesel for the future, we'll just send Peter Bracken around. He'll sort them out. It's all good.
It's also, lads, just when we're finishing up, I think it's also important to take into account that Chris and Darren, Nigel, we're all kind of part of the EVCIA, which has been set up for charging installs around Ireland. So I think even from that point of view, you could educate the owners when they're purchasing a charger, or if even for the infrastructure, we can all brush up, we can all get information on EasyGo ourselves, Dargan. You know, I think we all kind of have to play a big part here, and to give everyone as much information. We don't want to be like other countries having to purchase multiple cards, or at least give people as buying the car an opportunity to choose their charge point. And if they see, you'll have to see, like, anyone that's going to be buying EV chargers, they're looking towards renewable energy. They're going to want to put on PV systems on the roof. We should be all brushed up enough to even explain a basic PV system, what you could do, what you can avail of, at least by cutting your bills in half, not more. You know?
I would just, can I add a comment to that? My experience, I purchased a car, but I had done my own research, like Simon mentioned there, for weeks and weeks. And then when I got my charger, you know, it was completely from scratch. I was researching everything, and it took, it wasn't getting any sort of flow of information from a single source. And then discovered the EV groups on Facebook, and it was like a revelation. It was all that work that I had done was all literally being handed to me by the EV group, but it was too late. I had the car and I'd done all the work. So maybe, you know, sources like where the touch points are, like we mentioned, the dealer, but also the EV installer, but also the places where you charge, and right through the process, kind of help, you know, funneling people towards the information sources such as the EV associations like this, because it's just that I find that every time there's a touch point, you're not kind of led on to the next one, and I think that the industry needs to kind of maybe try to work that and take some responsibility there, right through from ESB to dealers to charger installers at home and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a good shout.
If I could just come in there, please. Yeah, if I could just say that, just following on from what Jerome said, the issue here is that, you know, albeit that all installers and there's a huge amount of guys out there have jumped on the bandwagon here now, but there's more than enough work for everybody. But the thing is that we're here to help, and that, you know, if I'm stuck for something, I know I can ring Jerome, or I can ring Darren, or I can ring Chris, and we can communicate with each other. And there's so many products there that everybody and we should be able to help everybody. And the forum is a great window of opportunity for people where they, you guys, Simon and John Barton, you guys have put our names out there, and I get calls on a daily basis from people asking questions. They may never buy a charge point, but we're here to help, and that's the main thing. And delighted to help.
Yeah, I'll just back that up there too. Nigel said we see it ourselves here in the office. We're passionate about what we do. We're passionate about the quality of the equipment we have. We would talk ourselves. We chit chat about different jobs. Geographically, there's never really any overlap on it, which is excellent. But we'd have customers that ring up getting false information from the garages, or they discover false information on the internet, which basically being an EV driver, being involved in the EV market, we know the pros and cons. We'll tell them the good stories, we'll tell them the bad stories. We'll tell them, like, don't bring it down to 3% because there's a good chance you're not getting home. We'll tell them about limp mode. We'll tell them about plugging the car charger in, the lashings array, and go for a tethered. Don't go for a tethered. Don't put it here, don't put it here. The trip hazards, the pros and cons about everything. Because after installing so many hundreds and thousands of chargers, it's just, we learn all the pros and cons about it. But again, coming back to the dealerships, I had a customer the other day who rang me up. She had bought a car, mainstream car, one of the top selling cars in the country, and she bought it from one of the biggest dealers here in Dublin. And she was very disappointed about the dealer, the guy in particular of the dealership, that he had no interest whatsoever in discussing the car, telling her about the car. Because when I was talking to her, I just happened to mention about the bad weather coming, the frosty ice, and I happened to mention that I had the same car at home, and if I hit the button on the app, the car defrosts, and it's a great little trick with the kids because you go out in the windows to defrost it. She had no inkling of that. So it's another little pro about driving EV and the efficiency of driving EV. Even my own particular circumstance, it was a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks before we got a chance here in the office to go out and install a charger for myself. And I had range anxiety for the first week. I was getting up, I had 200 something kilometers, but I was still worrying about where am I going to get my next charge. And then I popped down to Newlands Cross, and there was two people waiting there for me. And of course, it's a double header, triple headed unit, but you can only get one car in. So this was all life experience that we can pass on to our customers going forward. And it's enjoyable having chats and discussions with people on the phone. And as Nigel says, sometimes you mightn't hear from them again. That's it, they're gone. Whether you've given them the good advice or the bad advice, or they've gone with a different charger or something like that. And again, one of the, Jeremy touched on it there too, with the EVCIA, the Charge Install Association. That was set up initially last year. And it is going a bit slow, but we're working with SCAI and we're working with CRU and Safe Electrical and stuff like that. But that's there for ourselves, that we can all brainstorm for being installers, that we can brainstorm, we can share information quicker and better, so we can benefit ourselves and our companies going forward. So we're trained and we have the experience of that, so we can offer the customers a better service. But yourselves here, the group is a fantastic group. Every single day there's always a different post. Somebody has a question, no matter how silly or stupid it may seem, there's an answer. And we've always said that to the dealerships too. Like, I remember years ago sitting in a dealership and I just said to them, right, give us your question. You obviously have a question, but you're embarrassed to ask me. And they asked me something completely stupid in their opinion, but it was a warranted question. And it was great to have the answers for them going forward from there. I think, again, I would love to see there's another post there in the chat about the seatbelts and RSA getting involved. I think it's to give the good points, the pros, and a few of the cons about driving EVs. If they're not for everybody, I know there's plenty of ministers down in Kerry and stuff like that have issues about water and range and stuff like that. That's their decision. We have ministers that drive electric cars and they have no qualms and no issues about driving electric cars. There's plenty of ministers that go on bikes. That's their decision. I think going forward, again, it's education, but it's goodwill education and it's good training going forward. And if we can keep the momentum up, that good equipment, good training, good quality cars, EVs are good for the environment. Whether you want to be a tree hugger, you don't want to be a tree hugger. If you're a car person, it doesn't matter. It's to give the good vibe and the good impression of driving EV, the benefits of driving EV. Thanks.
Do you want to join the committee, Darren?
I'm already on 3 or 4 other committees, and I'm that passionate about trying to get committees.
This is a great interview process.
maybe
right, okay.
2 weeks.
I think we've run massively over, and I want to thank everyone who's stayed on half an hour, and I really want to thank everyone who's spoken today for participating as well. I think it's been a really useful event. I certainly learned some things myself as well, which is always good. So thank you everyone for your time. We'll be doing more of these, so hopefully we'll have you along again for the next one. In the meantime, go off, enjoy your wins, and we'll speak to you soon. Thanks a lot, guys.